Okay, you are here on Grizzly Talk, Tough Talk for Challenging Topics. Dr. Shea, can you please introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Kristina Shea, and I'm happy to be here with all of you and really excited to talk to you about this work. My background is currently I'm a deputy director and I run a relatively large prison system in the state of Nevada, and have multiple master's degrees and working on a doctoral degree. And so in general, I'm a lifelong learner that loves to use research and evidence-based practices to really transform organizations into positive structures and positive places where we can have more connection, we can have authentic relationships, we can have vulnerability, we can have trust. And so really thinking about what do organizations look like when they're thriving and we have optimal well-being.
It's a lot, and it definitely is work that has already paid off for many. And so you trained directly with Dr. Stephen Cartman, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was raised in San Francisco and in general didn't really learn about Cartman's work until probably about I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago. I had heard about the drama triangle because I think most of us, have heard it in some form or some fashion. And I didn't get deep into it until I finished my first master's degree in leadership and management, and I was down at a workshop. I met this wonderful friend of mine in Pepperdine in the program who works for an organization called SSCA. It's a leadership development organization. And I went down there and I participated in the leader development program where we learned about a model that the origins of the model itself came through transactional analysis. And so from that aspect, I just was genuinely curious about the work. And so I started digging as I do as a researcher and a scholar. I'm like, where's the origination of this model and where's the evidence based? And so in that I found transactional analysis and I found Stephen Cartman, and basically he's the last basically disciple of Eric Byrne that's alive, and he happened to be in San Francisco. And so in my way, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, Dr. Cartman, how are you? I'm such a fan of your work. And he's super receptive to communication from people and is really engaging and very much academic scholar in the sense that he wants this information to get spread to the world. It's like, how do you get the information out there and really use it to transform relationships and turn negative drama behaviors into positive connection?
Mm-hmm. And that's what fascinated me about the triangle when I first heard about it at the Meadows Behavioral Health Care. It was so effective. And I also had contacted Dr. Cartman to let him know, just how much his work has benefited others, because I think it's important to give people that credibility where it is due. And I just kind of learned so much more through our communications, and that's kind of how we got connected. So I was very grateful about that. Um,
Me as well.
and so for currently, where are you at with the things that you're involved in, and how does the Cartman Triangle work with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got certified in the what we call the Cartman process model, so KPM, and I was certified by the main two people who are running basically who kind of have Steve's work and are working with Steve's work as a legacy are Jerome and Pierre, and they're in France. So the majority of the work is really happening in France overseas. There is some work that's happening in the States. However, it's a bit of a different model than the essence of the model that Dr. Cartman wanted to perpetuate into the world. And so where I'm at with the work is not only implementing it in the prison system, where drama behaviors are incredibly high on
Mm-hmm.
a daily basis or weekly basis, going into the prisons and, going into SEG and going into closed housing units and going to the doors and talking to the offenders. I'm looking and sensing for different aspects of the games. So I'm looking for the hooks. I'm looking for compassion behaviors. I'm looking for the different roles. I'm, using my tools to really understand, what's happening, and then trying to leverage the other side of the work, and see if we can move past what we call taking our shields and our masks off and really trying to meet our needs and have those connections. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in the prison system to bring not only the research and the applied side of the work, but also the interventions that potentially can lead to deeper connection, more emotional intelligence, more vulnerability, more openness to our own innate value that we have as human beings, which is the essence of the work.
That's amazing. Yeah, because they absolutely need all of that, especially within those confines. And I mean, frankly, that's what the majority of what like 80% of those individuals never got, because our prison system is uh, a mental health care facility in a lot of different ways. I've heard some statistics somewhere, and I can't remember. I'll have to find that information, but like 80% of inmates, from my understanding, have pretty severe mental health issues. Um, is that anything, does that hold true, or am I near statistic wise the correct number?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. In our prison system, I just actually did. I do a lot of work in being a scholar. So I got my first master's degree was in leadership and management. My second master's degree was in the science of well-being at the University of Pennsylvania, studying on Dr. Seligman. So I'm really much more interested in how this work impacts people's well-being, their PERMA models, so positive emotions, engagement, meaning, their relationships, and their ability to accomplish goals, and additionally be able to, secure housing and have all these different aspects. And so in general, I did an academic presentation and pulled the data on mental health. And what's surprising is out of the 10,000 offenders that are in our system, 80% of them are not actually classified in our system as being mentally having a mental health impairment. There are some pretty high risks. So in general, the majority of the offenders are going to come out, and they're going to come out of the system. What I'm finding, which is really interesting, based on the research, is the scale, the validated and reliable scale that we have to date that measures the three roles of the drama triangle. When the scholars, Dr. Lack and Dr. Donaldson, who I'm working with on replicating that study in the prison system, they measured the scale, validated it, but not only that, they did some research on the association with non-secure attachment styles and higher anxiety and stress and depression and negative emotions. And what they
Mhm.
found is that different aspects of the drama scale or the drama roles have impacts on those. So one of the things I'm curious about is attachment styles in the prison system. And yes. So I think the first thing I'll share is, there's the drama triangle theory, and there's the applied side of the tools of the drama triangle. So in general, the theory itself, again, it was created by Dr. Cartman, who is a psychiatrist, was trained by Eric Byrne in transactional analysis and had a practice and spent 40 years or plus working with in clinical psychology. And also actually went in, and his father, who was also a doctor, did a lot of work in the prison system in general. And so the theory itself was born out of Dr. Cartman's work with clinical patients also it came out of his love for, he's an artist, and so he creates tons of paintings, and he's just a super creative human. Spends most of his time now in his art studio in San Francisco, painting and doing different dynamics. And a lot of the times in the paintings, I can kind of see the different correlations of all the different constructs of the theory at play. And so he doodles a lot. And when he doodles, he was watching sports and football. And what he found was the three roles. So in the sketch, the three roles are: number one, a player would intimidate an opponent to make them lose their means or temper during a game, or a player will give false indications of his adversaries in order to better deceive them during a game, or a player will pretend to be weaker so that the opponent lowers their vigilance. And so those are the three roles. And the three roles are the victim role, the rescuer role, and the persecutor role. And what we say in the theory is that all three roles are simultaneously being played out all at the same time. And at times there's different degrees of the game. And at the same time, it's highly unstable when somebody's in a role. So it's a role because it's not a person. There's a person behind the role. And so in general, we never say, oh, you're a rescuer, or you're a victim, or you're a persecutor. It's very much a person who, in my view, this isn't necessarily Cartman's theory, it's a deep sense of suffering that exists. And so can you identify the role, and can you extend compassion, which is the other side of the triangle in the model, and identify the role and help them meet their needs through the different techniques that we've learned over time.
The ways out of the triangle, per se, are the opposite. Yeah. And I will also include some information in like terms of diagrams and what it looks like, because I think that the visual really helps it to make sense for individuals. But so from my understanding, and I was quoted this by my director at the Meadows, but it somewhere along the way the information came out that we're always on the triangle, and if we're off of it 60% of the time, we're doing well. And I kind of use that because I observed it was pretty accurate. But the more you're aware of it, the more that you can stay out of it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in general, it's hard to say, that's one of the things why it's so crucial to have some of the validated and reliable scales, and then being able to do more research in systems to be able to understand that. I'll say that in general, learning the tools and all that of staying out of the triangle, not only knowing when you're in one of the three drama roles, but when somebody else that you're working with, or that maybe you're a clinical psychologist and you're in the space, and you're watching your client, and you're trying to get to the point where they're identifying what they need, and how do they meet their needs, and potentially what it is that's really driving these underlying feeling states. Being able to identify if they're in a potential role. And also, the drama triangle doesn't begin. So for example, if somebody's in, if we say, they're exhibiting, let's say in the persecutor role, where the person takes on the role, and he or she is unconsciously activating a false belief of, I'm more valuable than another, or I have the power to make another person feel bad or feel guilty, or I have no choice but to attack or criticize others to handle a situation. And you can sense it in their tone, and you can sense it in their speech. The drama triangle itself doesn't really happen until there's a switch, which means that the person switches a role. And so being able to identify those things, I think in general, not only can help us with our own internal well-being, but also with the well-being of people around us.
So when they switch the role, meaning like they go from uh, perpetrator down to victim, or offend out of the victim role, it's a common one that I see. So,
Mhm.
um, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically, again, so the role's not a person. People are playing the roles, and the idea is that the we're a lot of the times we're playing all three roles at the same time. And in general, at times, you'll see that some of the roles can actually happen, there's different levels. So for example, we talk about the internal game, the external game, the internal game, and then the script level, right? And so in general, we don't really address the script level games without a clinical contracting license, a clinical permission or a contract with a clinician. Then you're in that space. That's not I think our jobs in general when we're in life to identify that. However, what happens is that when we're in the game and the hook has been offered, so the drama role hook has been offered, and the person is inviting you in, and you accept the invite, that's the beginning. And then basically what happens is that the person you'll accept the invite, and psychologically what the theory says is that then the game begins when there's a switch. And so once the switch happens, then that's when the other player basically is involved, and you're going to play the game until there is the final payout or payoff, the psychological payoff, which a lot of the times ends in a lose-lose situation for both parties, with one person feeling a sense of hurt or loss and the other person feeling, whatever that emotion or emotional state is. And it kind of leads to pretty intense conflict depending on what degree of the game you're in. So yeah,
So,
yeah.
so tell me a little bit more about what you're doing for your research.
Yeah, so one of the things, again, when Cartman developed the theory by watching sports, by doodling, and by being in clinical practice, it was very much a theoretical construct. And at that time, Cartman was more applying the work in clinical settings and, doing therapy and things of that nature. And there wasn't really, although there is articles and things that have been published in transactional analysis journals and things like that, there's really not a robust amount of literature and evidence-based in the sense of the interventions that are used primarily to think about how we can, one, get out of drama, two, identify drama, three, like know when it's happening and what happens from a well-being perspective, and for understanding the negative impacts of it. I think there's a lot of theory, it makes sense. And so my goal is to actually study it and go back to formative research and processes using very rigorous research methods, and going through. And I got inspired to do the research primarily by talking to Cartman about some of the things of, what happens to one of the things that Cartman's very interested in now is from a well-being perspective, when you are in a drama dynamic, and let's say you're stuck in it, and let's say, to your point, 60% of the time, what impact does that have on the cellular level of your body? Not only your relationships, but there potentially might be some type of issue with, functioning, like physical
Mhm.
functioning, not only psychological, but in your body, and I'd love to be able to further down the line do some of that research. But right now, it's going to be formative interviews about the drama triangle. It's going to be replication of the research that was done by Dr. Lack and Dr. Donaldson of the first reliable and validated drama triangle scale in clinical populations. And then from there, my main interest is in really studying interventions and potentially studying one of the elements of Cartman's model that's probably most significant, which is the drama, the compassion triangle and the compassion analysis of, how do you find positive intent? How do you extend compassion, and how do you use compassion skills and virtues to be able to really get to the heart of and offer people out of drama, offer yourself out of drama, which would be ideally as well, because one of
Mhm.
the theories is that not only do we invite the game with other people, we invite the game internally, and we can actually switch internally in our own drama triangle. So that's super fascinating. It's like, how much of it are we perpetuating ourselves? How much are we, when we're doing self-blame and self-talk, and we're going through the conversation of, they're so much better than me. I can't do anything right. It's not possible. I'm so stupid. You can, and you're
Mhm.
doing these switches, the roles internally without even inviting anybody into the game. And what impact does that have on well-being? So,
Mhm.
so much opportunity for research.
But well, I think you can see with all of their commercials that they enter into those dynamics pretty regularly, and it is effective.
Yep, exactly. And that's the part for me as well, is that, if you watch movies and you watch, drama movies, most of it has all three of the triangles playing out. And that's why people watch TV. So I'm thinking about like news stories and stuff. It's like, oh, the news with all these negative things and all this stuff, deceit and lies and all the things that are happening. And it's like, oh, what if we shared positive stories and all this and that. And it's like, oh, right, it doesn't sell. Like, if you watch a movie and it doesn't have some drama switches and drama dynamics, does it even engage us from a engagement perspective?
Right. And even for me, I mean, I know I have to have it and for it to be interesting, but also in being a therapist, just watching shows, I can ruin them so quickly by analyzing them like that too. It is very apparent. Um
The other
and
part too is one of the things I wanted to share with you too, to this before I lose this train of thought, is that in the Cartman process model, one of the theories that we have, and again, it needs research and it needs, studying and all this, is that in order to be really successful at staying out of drama and being in the compassion triangle side or the compassion scale side, is you have to be a master at drama as well. So it's kind of like both sides being able to understand. And it's like, oh, right, it's like being super sophisticated at the game playing and then understanding what's here, and then you're kind of choosing both sides. And so we talk a lot about, is it possible, to have a game-free life? And Dr. Cartman is, very much so, he believes that a game-free life is possible. And then, and from my perspective, knowing how to play the games really well does potentially allow you at times, I think, to have the perspective to be able to, enter into the compassion sides.
really a good question because you hear everybody say, I don't want any drama, and but life just kind of happens like that too at the same time. And it's so unconscious and people just do it um, without even knowing that they're doing it. So,
And the behaviors are justified in organizations as well. It's like, it's almost as if we reward some of the behaviors as well.
mhm,
It's like, oh, you're gonna get promoted because you know how to, like sales and all these different roles that people are playing in organizations. And, like, you think about some of the things that have happened with like ethics and like Enrons and organizations that have been highly destructive. And, at times, like, I'm curious if we're rewarding that behavior versus, giving people the tools to enter into authentic conversations. And so, for example, in state government, in my experience, being vulnerable and sharing authentic feeling states of with, no blame, no aggression, no passive aggression, where you're authentically sharing, like, I'm angry right now, and what I really want is to be able to do this, and how can we go about having the conversations in a way that's productive, and being able to facilitate conversations where you're moving towards solutions.
mhm.
It's uncomfortable. It's almost like people are like can't figure out how to navigate. And one of the premises in Cartman's work is really the authentic apology, and these ABCs and these different tools and frameworks of,
Mhm.
if we know that we're humans and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be in drama sequences and drama dynamics, having the authentic apology that comes with life and identifying when you've made a mistake, owning it, and then extending the apology and the compassion to yourself and to others.
Seems so simple, but it's the hardest thing for people to do if it ever happens.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
and how to do it too. I don't think a lot of people are taught how to do it, in terms of what an apology is versus an actual amends. And that's one of the things that I bring into play when with the Cartman triangle. I use it for my focus is on intimacy disorders and relationship dynamics. And that's a part of it, is making the authentic amends. And I think it's Chris Stapleton has a song, can't you just say you're sorry? And but adding on to that, mean it and follow it up with adjusted behavioral change, because saying sorry is so empty, and you'll just see people will say sorry, 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 and not do anything about it just to get somebody off their back. When those like when you're looking at intimacy disorders and couples fighting, and most often I'll see one go into the victim role, and you did this to me, and the other one will be put into the offender role, and they play in defense and go back and forth. And a lot of times we'll see the victim pop into the offender role, or offend out of the victim role per se, and have these swings. And then one of them will go to the rescuer and try to save the victim. And it really is fascinating how people do volley between all three of those roles.
So yeah, the three roles in the drama triangle. So first of all, P is for persecutor. The persecutor role acts out through verbal or nonverbal cues by dominating, insulting, or threatening. For some people, being the recipient of a simple persecutor attitude is enough to lose their temper and make a mistake in the game. So a lot of the times the persecutor is really aggressive and blameful and all that to kind of push people off their edge, which I'm sure you've experienced. It's one of the roles that it's most often you're able to see because of the innate blame and attack and the aggressive nature of it. That a lot of the times that people are very loud, they're very angry, it's very pointed, and the cues are all very sharp and all that. So I think it's easy to identify. R for rescuer, the rescuer acts out by verbally or nonverbal cues by doing a favor for the other without being asked to do so. So the unsolicited advice, and this may be enough to disturb the other who lives in a moment of confusion and makes a mistake. So the idea of being that hero, and really being there to help another person without being asked. And then when it goes south, then that's when the switch will happen. So
Mm-hmm.
the V is for victim. So the victim acts out by verbal or nonverbal cues to let others think that he is fragile, or that he is afraid, or he or she are afraid, or they. For some people, seeing simple victim behavior is enough to lose clear thinking and make a mistake. So the idea, when you see that, oh, I'm hooked by that, how do you, you're drawn into that, and it does really perpetuate the game, and kind of lead to lack of intimacy and trust, and all the aspects of negative conflict behaviors that do really drive swords and not only swords, but the energetic drain that comes from being in drama dynamic. I'm sure you've experienced it, but in general, when I'm in a deep drama dynamic, which still happens, it is incredibly emotionally and physically and psychologically draining. It's almost as if my vitality is really low, and hence why the research around well-being and drama dynamics, I think, is really important, because if we can make the case, or we can not prove, but we can kind of provide data and science that can show some type of correlations or causations around those two things. I think it would make a lot of sense for people to kind of like be more self-aware around their own internal drama behaviors. So I wanted to just say a couple more things. So the role of the persecutor: when a person takes on the role of the persecutor, they are unconsciously activating a set of false beliefs. I'm more valuable than others. I have more power. And I have no choice. So it's as if they feel like they have to do this, because if they don't do it, nobody will. The role of the rescuer is when a person takes on the role of the rescuer, they unconsciously fly to the rescuer, the rescue of others who do not ask for anything, and unconsciously activate a set of false beliefs that others will only have value if they help them. They have the power to make others feel better by offering the help, and they have no choice but to help them. And what's so interesting to me is, in general, in the prison system, when it comes to the rescuer behavior, we don't see a lot of it from the correctional officer perspective, because they're not interested in help seeking behaviors. Asking for help or providing help in general, one of the questions is, what impact does help seeking behaviors have on reducing the rescuer role, but also in general, if you're not interested, if you don't like to ask for help, is that something that either mediates or moderates the rescuer role? And then finally, the other one is the victim role. So when a person takes on the victim role, they confuse complaining with that of asking. So they're like, oh, Megan, like, it's just so hard. My job is just so difficult. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so the idea is that I'm activating a set of beliefs that I'm less valuable than others, or others have the power to make me feel bad, or I have no other choice but to complain and depend on the goodwill of others. And the victim role is the one I see most in the prison system. So when I go into the prison system and I'm having a conversation with an offender and they're complaining about everything, or even in my office when my staff come in and they're complaining about everything, what's your solution? What do you need? What are you asking for? What can I do to help? How would you go about, changing this if you had the ability to change it, and really trying to get them out of this space where they feel as if they have no power to make change, and somebody else has to do it for them.
Yeah, it's such a good question too. So what are your possibilities to find a good solution for the situation? Or like, I'll ask, do you just want to vent? Because sometimes people just want to let off some steam too and process what's going on because it's so stressful, and maybe that's their solution. But yeah.
I think I'm so curious about your thoughts about it. But in general, what I see in a lot, most of the time, not only organizationally, but also in the prison system, is, asking for what you need or want is a very, very difficult thing. And so, lately, what I've been doing is, asking for my apologies. If there's something that happened and I'm in a space where I feel like I need an apology, I will ask for it. I will say, Megan, I need you to apologize. And then the person can either enter into it or not. And then the other person can decide to receive it. And so in general, I think that, imagine a world in which the offenders can ask for what they need, or people can ask for what they need, and we can respond. And ideally, we'd be able to commit to something to be able to help meet the needs of others if we can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I work with individuals with intimacy disorders, that's one of the things that we focus on too, is first identifying what the needs are and what the feelings are underneath that. Because if you ask them, what are you feeling? They're like, good, great, fine. And I'm like, no, that describes a cheeseburger you just got for lunch. I mean, that's not how you're feeling. Are you feeling like um calm and at peace, or like joyful, or pain, or shame, or what does that feel like in your body? Because literally in your body, that's what feelings are. I think I was like 32 when I realized that. So a lot of people don't, we're not educated on that. And when you don't understand that, it drives you. And that's what is driving all of these interactions too. And it's such a powerful thing when you can say, I'm angry, but you don't have to act into it. And right now I need an apology. So you're not waiting and just expecting someone who can't read your mind to give you an apology, and then you get even more angry when I'm not referring to you in general, and I'm thinking of just intimacy disorders and trying to come up with an example. But a lot of times people will try to they'll expect others to read their minds. And then when that doesn't happen, it escalates those feeling states. And that's where the drama triangle gets intensified, and it's off to the races in the party with all of the interaction until it gets extinguished somewhere. Um,
Yeah, it's so true. And, from my perspective, like one of the things when I'm going into the prison systems, into the housing units is really looking for the emotional state, right, of things and where people are at and trying to be very mindful of the arousals. And in general, it's like, I am so curious about, the different value sets of, different emotions. And it seems like in general, the primary emotion that's running through a lot of the offenders is anger, and I understand that. I can imagine, there's lots of things to be angry about. However, it's the way they're expressing the anger through super high arousal, yelling, and a lot of attacking and blaming and being in the persecutor role.
mhm.
And what could that look like if they were able to calm down and ask for what they need in a way that's healthy, that's a way that's non-blame, non-attack. And I think from my perspective, although when people are angry and they're very high arousal anger in the work context and in the offender context, from my perspective, it doesn't bother me that much because I can deal with the swings of it. The harder part is in intimate, relationships with, your loved one, and it's like being able to apply this in the workplace or applying it in a professional setting, and then you're in your intimate life and you're trying to navigate, you know and it's like, oh right, then there's that, like it's almost like the stakes are much higher,
Yeah.
and then I wonder at times when we're in these really high drama tendency organizations or areas, and I'm so curious about your thoughts with it, because my sense is that you probably are also so around it a lot, is once we get home to our families, like we don't have the energy to really spend in those deep connections with our loved ones. So we're giving all our energy in the workplace, and then when we come home, it's like, how do we continue to protect our energy and our vitality so that we can have the deep connections where it's most important? And I fail at that regularly.
Yeah,
So
same here. It is so hard because, I mean, this work is just depleting in itself automatically, but you do have to have enough left over for those intimate connections with your loved ones, and or at least be able to say, I am drained and I'm sorry. I wish I could give you more. Like I'll do that with my daughters, and how can I best help you at this point with what I have? But it's still, I think it's that communication and an identification that is 100% of it. And it gives the person also the opportunity to voice their feelings and where they're at, and not keep it all stuffed inside, and not get drawn into the triangle, and not have to go through that entire wash rinse cycle of the same type of draining emotional craziness.
yeah, yeah. And I think that the thing is like, it does really, come back down to conflict and, this idea, one of my advisors and mentors that I've trained with, and who is very, very aware of this work, in the States, Dr. Nate Regier. He talks about the idea of conflict being used for positive. So the energy of conflict itself is there, and then you can choose left or you can choose right. If you're going left, it's the drama conflict, where you've got the con, and you got the basically what we call the game equation, and you're in it, and you're doing this, and you're going that way. Or choosing right and going into the compassion triangle, and thinking about how you can use conflict to really take the energy and use it to create something that didn't exist, which has more connection, more intimacy, and more energy, so that you can go home and have those deeper bonds, and you're not totally drained by unmet needs. And just from my perspective, when I'm experiencing the drama role, and even with the tools I have, it's still I still experience anger, or experience disappointment, or frustration, or sometimes sadness about the time it takes to navigate the triangle. I'm like, wait, we can just get to solutions so much easier if we just have the authentic conversation. Oh, we can't. We have to go through. And so in organizations, my sense is that it and relationships, it's taking a lot of our intellectual time, and emotional and physical time to navigate those interactions.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we're trained to have those boundaries too, to be able to monitor and um, allow what we give off and allow what we invest in. But the general population doesn't have that awareness too. So it it is so important where you invest that energy. Um, and
I
it's
agree.
I, I think with just a little bit of an improvement in the communication and how this model helps with that makes all the difference in the world. So I'd really like to see what those outcome studies are with a person's well-being. Because if you're not okay emotionally, you're not going to be okay physically. So
Yeah, and just really, thinking about the interventions. We have interventions right now. We have different, models that we have the Cartman process model, and we also have another compassionate accountability model that was created by Dr. Rogier. And so again, I think we have these interventions. However, from my perspective, I'm really interested in intervention research and really thinking about generalization or being able to go into clinical settings or offender settings or organizational settings and all that. And, since it has been a primarily studied clinical model, not everything is transferable, and so what really does work and how, and just what we might discover when we, start entering into, the interventions, like, for example, emotional intelligence training for 6 weeks and what impact that has on the victim role, and using evidence-based, because we have a lot of the evidence-based interventions already in emotional intelligence, and a lot of these processes. And so, what impact does, emotional vocabulary have on your ability to express your needs in a way that's impactful, because like, as you were sharing, it's like, how are you feeling? Fine and good. And it's like, well, there's like hundreds of emotional words that that can be used, and just increasing the emotional vocabulary, like what impact does that have on it? And so I have lots of questions, very little answers, and just feel very grateful to be continuing to bring Dr. Cartman's work not only into academia and research, but also the goal of being able to create a model that's applied, that has rigorous research and evidence, and also can, be scalable as interventions into many different settings.
yeah, more normalized and standard and have that proof like, hey, see how effective this is. I mean, I can say I use it time and again and it's always effective. It's like a magical transformation for people. And there's not been a case that I remember where it doesn't work, which is why I love it so much, because it is so effective, because it is such an integral part of my work as a therapist. So it would be really, at least we could put numbers to it and I can boast a little bit more about it. So
Mhm. And what you can do is, like, right now, what we can do is, since we have the validated and reliable scale that's primarily used in these clinical applications, you can use it as a self-report tool for, your clients, and be able to, like, have them, identify. And then from there, it's like, oh yeah, like, and there's the awareness around that, and start the process. Because the theory does say that many of us have particular roles and hooks that we enter into, and roles that we like to play most. And in general, from my perspective, when I think about my own drama behaviors, it's really the rescuer role that brings me the most kind of internal satisfaction, primarily because I want to be needed, and I want to be competent, seen as competent, and I want to be able to have a lot of the solutions. And from my perspective, going into leadership and thinking about this idea of letting go of like having all the answers and all the solutions and wanting to help everybody and just asking people what I can do, how can I help? Do you need my help? What would be most impactful for you now and why? And just using curiosity, the art of questioning. I think one of the models that you'll see is like, oh, the opposite side of the rescuer role is the coach. It's the that role as coach and just being open, be the art of open-ended questions and really being aware of what the impact that questions have on relationships, and that for me I think would be a really simple thing that can happen.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and using a scale, actually. I'd like to get if you could send me a link to that, I'll definitely share it and start using it. It would be a good measure. I'd really like to uh, look at the everything that it pertains. How many questions is on the scale? Are on the
Yeah,
scale.
so the scale is let me see, it's right here. It has the final one that because they ended up kind of like scaling it down by study three because they realized that some of the factors were hanging a little bit different when they did the statistical analysis. And so there is for the victim, there's 6 questions. For the rescuer role, there is 7 questions. And for the persecutor role, there is 5 questions. So there's a total of 18 questions.
So it could be pretty brief. That's not long at all.
Yeah, it's not like, I mean, in general, I'm sure you're aware of the psychometric, work. And I mean, some of the psychometrics I've taken, they're like 200 questions and 150 questions. And so, yeah, 18 questions, I think is pretty reasonable.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll send you this study when we get off. And yeah, I'd be curious what your thoughts are primarily around the work in study three that they did about attachment security and, relationship. They did a relationship questionnaire. And I just feel like there's so much opportunity now that we have the scale and we can replicate and we can bring it into clinical applications. You can bring it into, all these different areas and really start thinking about, the impact that this has. And then from there, again, my next thought is like really thinking about the interventions and, what interventions are most impactful and why. And
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So for other areas of your work, do you use the Cartman triangle outside of that? Or I know you're talking about within the prison systems. What else is it that you're involved in? Because I know you're involved in a lot of different things. I can't keep up with.
yeah, I think it's from my perspective, the Cartman work. I mean, the main area that I'm most interested in the work now is the research side, right? So
Mhm.
setting up IRB studies and really perpetuating the academic journals. So my goal is to do some research and publish on it,
Mhm.
and then do some replication studies in the prison system and also in organizational settings. And
Mhm.
I think in general I'd really like to be able to expand once the theory and everything's in a really good space. I want to be able to expand the work and bring more of the interventions that Dr. Cartman has outside of the drama triangle. Because again, he identified the drama triangle, and his seminal work is really in the compassion triangles, which is the work he really wants to get into the world about compassion analysis and different aspects. And he has other toolkits within there that really do lead to intimacy in the sense of, intimacy in relationships. Again, like authentic apologies and all that. So, my hope is to be able to bring it to more organizations and be able to bring it to more clinical settings and be able to like, have the framework be more applied in general. And it's also important to me to make sure we have rigorous research and evidence-based around things that we're applying. And that's, one of my personal passions. So, being an academic and wanting to make sure that primarily in organizations that we're doing no harm when it's difficult to, in my opinion, it's difficult to bring clinical theories into organizational without the permissions of the contracts that you have with clinicians and so it's like,
Yeah.
is this too much in an organization because this isn't therapy and this is not, so
No, it's a good area to investigate. And plus, I mean, if you're using it in the legal area, wasn't it working with legislature? Is that correct? And improving, those types of communications between staff and in enhancing that whole environment. Like that's really important work. That's affecting everybody at the end of the day. So
yeah, imagine a world where, so my theory is that drama roles and drama behavior and drama dynamics at the social level, the psychological level, and the script level are energetic suckers of time and lead to negative outcomes overall. Because again, one of the things I've experienced working in the government is there's a lot of game playing and there's a lot of drama dynamics, and then people don't work together. So then they're creating all these silos and things. And then, if you're funded by government and you're, for example, if you think about politics or large governmental entities, I mean, it would be in taxpayers' best interest for us to be able to collaborate, have authentic conversations, have, intimacy in relationships, and be able to move systems forward that can really, change the world and, create better programs and things and outcomes. However, what I see most is just the blame game. It's really this blame, not my job, I didn't do it, they're the ones that did it, this and that, and it never gets anywhere. The other thing I wanted to tell you about from being an international an ICF coach, international certified coach with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. Um, I believe there is something there with the studying of this model and the evidence-based side of it and the applied side with coaching interventions. So thinking about doing coaching research and coaching interventions where you're doing one-on-one coaching, or maybe there's an app or there's a, some type of AI platform that can, be able to provide people access to, that one-on-one coaching theory based on the drama triangle and the compassion scales.
that's a lot. It's a lot of work. I mean, that's exactly how we got to where we are today with our legal issues. And most nobody can reach across the aisle and have a decent conversation, and because everybody's so shut down and closed off and in their roles, and you can see what those roles are playing out on a daily basis within the political system. So hopefully it'll create change for the better.
Yeah, and again, like my primary interest is in organizations that thrive, the science of well-being, positive psychology, and thinking about really having full integration with engagement, relationships, positive emotions, and all that. And I think that when we're in the drama roles, positive emotions are very low. You're not experiencing a lot of positive emotions. However, it'd be good to study it to understand what impact it has on positive emotions. My hunch is based on the seminal research that Lack and Donaldson did, that there is negative emotional connections, and we understand the impact of negative emotions primarily on decision making with Barbara Fredrickson's theory and Broaden and Build, and these impacts of like creativity and curiosity and different things where negative emotions really do drive the narrowing of your thought processes, and additionally drive reduction in being able to create systematic, ideation about all the different options. It's like tunnel vision, this is what we're doing and why. And I think in organizations and even in relationships, it's like, oh, perspective taking and understanding, the positive intent and what's going on internally with the other person, and then being able to offer compassion or forgiveness or whatever virtue it is that's necessary, to be able to move the relationship forward. I think there's a lot there that can be unpacked. Yeah.
That stuff interplay with intimacy. So, um, is there anything that else that we haven't covered already that you would like the public to know or people to really understand about the work that you do?
Let me think about that. That's a good question. I think one of the most important things is that, I think, the the drama triangle, although, it's sexy and it's fun to be in, and it's exciting, and at times sometimes it's all we know, we don't recognize it's happening. I think the crux of Cartman's work is not only in the drama triangle, but it's also in the toolbox of the compassion analysis and the compassion triangles of really, you know being able to have the tools to understand, one, all the different degrees of the triangle that are intersecting in yourself and in others, and being able to do a deep dive into what's really happening. And then from there, being able to offer yourself out and offer others out if they choose to do so. And hopefully, offer different perspectives of thinking about things, so we're not in, defensive or justified roles in general. And so I think from my perspective, the bottom line is that, the work, is really a toolkit and a process. So in the sense that, you know you can identify the drama triangle, you can identify what it is and all that, and then you can make a choice to flex these tools and, be able to offer, yourself and others an opportunity, for intimacy.
Yeah, and it really is a beautiful thing at the end of the day when you're able to do that. Um,
Because I think in general, most of us are searching for deep connection and intimacy. And, one of the things I've been reflecting on too is, the loneliness epidemic that we exist, and, we exist in, and thinking about loneliness, and, that, in this world of, connecting via the phone and having, a lot of phone and screen time, and moving away from having the ability to be in connections and high quality connections with others. And, what impact is that having on the increase of drama behaviors and more broadly? I think that goes back to your point about, like we see it on social media, we see it everywhere. Um, and the question I have is, when can we start providing examples and tools of the other side of it? You know?
well, you see it all the time with people who are suffering from loneliness and isolation and depression because that they're portraying themselves as being, picture perfect on social media, and there's absolutely no connection. But I mean, we've lost connection and we have an epidemic of mental health issues because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm available for people if they have questions, and, happy to provide any further information or thoughts and feedback. And I'd love to hear from people about what they think and they've experienced with the stories of Drama Triangle. And that's one of the things with the formative research I think is going to be most interesting, is like, what if we ask people what their experience is in the roles, and really do a strong qualitative, design, that can really shed light on some of the stories and what happens and why, because we might find it's much more complex than we really understand.
Yeah, I think I think it is. Absolutely. Well, how can somebody get a hold of you? Do I have your permission
Yeah,
to?
so I'm
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you can share. Yeah, you can share it. And then when you post it all, I'll share it through my networks as well. One of the things for me is I would probably share my we can share my email address. One of the things is with the prison system and the research, my goal is to, you know, I want and as soon as I'm done with this project, um my goal is to, you know, have the research from the drama triangle in a good place so that then I can launch into the world like my vision is a platform, a process, some coaching mechanisms and some type of interventional science through my organization, my nonprofit organization that can be applied. And so once I'm in a good space to do that and not running a prison system.